Hello and welcome to the MSTieCast. I'm your host, Toby Mobius. Joining me for this episode is our very good friend, Joshua McLeod.
Aye, back ye laddies. Oh wait, I'm American. Never mind. But I am here.
And joining us today is a very special guest. You might not have heard of him, but after this, we hope you'll check out his work. Mr. Ben Solovey.
Hello.
How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, just fine. Just prepping for some Memorial Day potluck action. Maybe it's not the most exciting thing I've ever heard of, but it'll work.
We're actually doing that here at my house as well, so we know what that's like.
Ooh, what you got going? Yeah.
My granddad's preparing some chili for a potluck thing, and there's going to be like hamburgers and hot dogs and such. So.
You barbecue?
Yeah, we're big into our grilled meats.
Yeah, I got an apartment, so I kind of got to go elsewhere for my barbecue fix.
Well, I live in the South, so.
Oh yeah,
it's not hard to go out and find a barbecue.
Oh yeah, exactly. How many types of smokers does my family own? Too many, probably, but too many is never enough. But yeah, I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, actually. I'm only a couple of hours from Atlanta, originally. Mm-hmm.
And people may know Mr. Solovey from under a certain other name, under the name of, or rather for a certain project. Ben, why are you, what is the project you're working on right now that people may be familiar with?
Oh, well, I'm the project lead on a crowd-funded restoration of the film Manos, The Hands of Fate, from 1966, directed by Harold P. Warren. Also happened to be on a very good episode of Mystery Science Theater.
And a project that we're very much looking forward to and very much looking forward to learning about in the process of this interview.
Well, before we get into the Manos restoration, I feel it is just that we ask you, how did you get into Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Oh, well, for the longest time I didn't have cable TV because we lived on the side of a mountain. On the top of a mountain we would have had cable, bottom of a mountain would have had cable, but not on the side, so it took a little while. And then as soon as I got that, it was either Turner Classic Movies or Sci-Fi Channel for me, and that happened to time out just fine for Mystery Science Theater appearing on the Sci-Fi Channel. Although I'd seen it before. I think the first episode I ever saw was at a friend's house, Attack of the VI Creatures. I was
about to say.
It's kind of amazing how many people get into Mystery Science Theater after seeing it at their friend's house.
Yeah, I
That's how we do it.
I fell onto that crowd.
I don't, but I got into it through a friend showing me a YouTube video, so I guess it's the same principle.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So I was recording all of the Sci-Fi Channel episodes that I could manage at the time. So I have all the old tapes of my own with all the 90s commercials that got so frustrating. Because it's a 90-minute show, but they'd stretch it into a 2-hour block. You know, you do the math, that's like a whole show's worth of commercials to deal with.
Mm-hmm. It's about 30,
but most people today wouldn't have that problem.
29 minutes worth.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find any of these tapes, you should try and rip the commercials, because people on YouTube go crazy for 90s commercials.
I didn't at the time, but we'll see. We'll see. And yeah, it was something that my sister and I really bonded over to, was Mystery Science Theater.
No one in my family's into Mystery Science Theater, so I'm kind of alone within my family on that. But there are other people I have to talk about it with, so that's cool.
Well, that's dodged a bullet there. I mean, you kind of sharing it is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
sorry, Josh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so you're watching in the sci-fi, at what point do you see the Comedy Central era?
Well, at that time, it was being released on video from Rhino at the time. So I mean that's kind of the best way to see it at that moment, and then eventually digital archive project kicks in, and you're able to see more that you wouldn't have ordinarily seen. But Manos, never went out of print because it was public domain. So I think that's one of the first ones from the Joel era that many people who first tuned in on the Sci-Fi Channel got to see.
Wasn't it your first, Toby?
Yes, Menace and Spade was actually my very first episode of Mystery Science Theater ever, which I've been repeatedly told, and now think is the case, that that's probably not the best thing to watch for the first episode. Start them off on something easy, like The Magic Sword, or even the Mystery Science Theater movie. But no, I jumped in head first because I was intrigued by my friend's drawings of Torgo. So I had to see this for myself. And I did, and it was good.
Well, that's good. I mean, if you can stick with it after that, because of all the movies they've done, it's right up there with Beast of Yucca Flats in terms of it doesn't feel very eventful. Let's just put it that way. It feels longer than it is.
That's very, very true. It's very much a nothing movie.
Now, being that Toby and I, we admit we saw Manos fairly early in our Mystery Science Theater career. When you first saw Manos, did it stick out as a bad movie?
I would just say it stuck out, period, because it felt very different from the typical movie that you would see on the show. Well, in particular, if you were accustomed to the sci-fi era, that was a pretty good era in terms of like the quality of movies that were being obtained, bigger studio movies. I mean, got Revenge of the Creature going, which, I'm still amazed that they got the rights to that, because today it's getting a Blu-ray of its own, it's getting that kind of thing. And so to just imagine this movie, where did it come from? Even during the show, they're kind of amazed.
It was helped in the Sci-Fi Channel era that they had but they had the Universal movie library to sift through, because Sci-Fi is owned by Universal.
And that lent it to, well, for instance, I think Diabolic it's probably one of my favorite movies, period. I could teach a class on that movie. It's great. But, to watch it on Mystery Science Theater, well, you kind of have to... I'm very much a stickler for the fact that watching a movie on Mystery Science Theater isn't exactly the same as watching that movie. So when people say I've seen it on Mystery Science Theater, it's sort of like, well, you didn't really, because we're watching an interpretation of it. I guess the French would call it a détournement.
A heavy edit, especially of, some of the films have massive stuff cut out, and then there's, we're seeing the TV version of some of the films. Even the version they get isn't the version that, is available on VHS or on DVD. And there are a lot of cuts. Yeah. I agree with that completely.
And on the other hand, you have films like Werewolf, which are just delightful, even on their own. I did eventually get the DVD of Werewolf because I had a very good bargain store in my hometown.
Oh, good old Werewolf.
Oh, yeah, and it's even funnier kind of on its own because the atmosphere is so strange. Yeah.
So
all these foreigners pretending to be in Arizona.
I take it you've seen a lot of Mystery Science movies on Rift.
Absolutely, and I think it's something that if someone wants to get a little bit more enjoyment out of the show, they can try. Or enjoyment out of these movies, because a lot of them are actually very enjoyable on their own. Of course, I have, like a lot of people complain that our generation grew up with like a 30-minute attention span. Well, this is a show that's 90 minutes, so I mean, that's a pretty good start. If you can watch a show for 90 minutes, you can watch a movie for 90 minutes, and even if it's slow-paced, like a lot of the Roger Corman movies, you can find something to enjoy in them.
I feel the need to ask it, are there any movies you've seen on Mystery Science Theater that you find zero enjoyment in whatsoever?
Very good question.
Well, that's tricky. That's tricky because obviously, I feel like the less happens, the better sometimes. For instance, the Coleman Francis movies or The Creeping Terror, which to watch them by themselves, you would just feel very alone because like the sound design is so minimal. They're really very bare. Like the actors look cold. You know, it's like the kind of movies you'd make after the bombs drop. They're a little harder on their own, for sure.
Right.
I'm trying to think of movies for Mystery Science that are like that, and I really can't think of any I get absolutely no enjoyment out of.
I can think of a few. Like I mean, I can't sit through like Robot versus the Aztec Mummy or like.
Well, I mean, it's hard though. It's hard to name movies that have no merit whatsoever.
Right.
Because really, a lot of them have something going for them, something interesting, and that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, even Robot has the kind of cool looking robot and it has a very interesting view of Mexican culture, but it's just not my cup of tea.
Right.
Which is the one where Santos shows up like fairly late in the game? Samson versus the
Vampire.
No, it's Vampire Women. Yeah, like you're watching a movie. It must be like 30 minutes in, and then everyone's dressed normally, and then in walks, a masked wrestler out of nowhere.
El Santo.
Or Samson by American definition, or rather K. Gordon Murray definition.
Love K. Gordon Murray. I'm actually acquainted with the guy doing a K. Gordon Murray documentary, Daniel Griffith. He's done a lot of the extras on the Mystery Science Theater discs. You should totally interview him, no doubt.
We're definitely interested. We're definitely interested.
Mm-hmm.
We will.
He will be put on our list.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's got a website, Ballyhoo Productions, something like that, and he's also from Chattanooga, coincidentally.
Cool.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's start to talk about the Manos project, as it were. Now seems like a good time. First, did you ever think you'd head up this project or something like this for Manos?
Well, I didn't really think about it. The other thing that I neglected to mention is that I've off and on collected 16mm prints, and I'm acquainted with people that collect 35mm prints and screen them, and especially in Los Angeles, we're kind of swimming in old prints at times. It feels like occasionally there will be a wave of that kind of thing, and you'd be surprised what you can find. So when you collect something, you always wonder what you would do if you found something very unique or one of a kind. And in my case, well, it was Manos Stands of Fate. Found a lot of original elements for that, which was, I remember thinking to myself before I even got it, I was like, ooh, if this looks good enough, I should totally make a new transfer. I didn't realize quite how good it was going to be, or how much, how much interest there would be for it too. That was pretty cool.
You talk a little bit about finding it on your website, and I'm somewhat curious. Did the person, we won't name this person or anything like that, but did the person know, or did it seem like they knew what Manos was, or what Atomic Brain was, or what any of the films this person had? Did they know the sort of cult popularity of the film?
I don't think they were really. Well, I can tell you that it was the grandson of the original distributor, and really, to him, a lot of this was just boxes that he'd had in storage. He'd never actually screened any of these films, and he didn't really seem interested in it. It was just more like, well, I'm moving, time to clear through the last of it, essentially. I mean, I don't know if he'd actually have sat down and viewed these movies that he would have seen, what some of us see in it, which is an opportunity to have better copies out there, for sure. So, I mean, it takes a certain amount of... The reason I was able to do this project with any effectiveness was because of, well, firstly, where I lived, but also the field that I'm in. I'm a cameraman, and I know a lot of people in post-production. Restoring a movie is kind of like someone plops a movie into your lap that is shot but still needs editing, visual effects, sound, all that stuff. So to know people who can do that and do it with some enthusiasm, and it takes a very unique set of circumstances. So I had the opportunity. I couldn't not do it. I'd have been a fool not to. Yeah.
It's a good thing because they, easily could have been destroyed.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely, or even worse, hoarded.
Yep. They were. Obviously Manos was in good condition, which.
Well,
it was. It was.
Yes and no.
It was better than the Alpha home video DVD that we have. I'm assuming, or at least it has more.
Far better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sharpness was great. The color was great. It had a lot of dirt because this particular source was never meant for public consumption, essentially, and it was freely handled by hand during the editing process. But it was Ektachrome. It was reversal stock, so it did not fade over the years.
That's good.
Yeah, so it just took a lot of nitty-gritty, getting right down to it, and cleaning it up, and not very much automation in this process. A lot of it does involve going through frame by frame.
And how long have you've been working on it since, I think, 2000? Okay, let me rephrase the question. At what point after you got the film did you start to restore it?
Let me see. I got the film sort of the summer, well, no, more like the fall of 2011, and it kind of sat for a little while I figured out exactly what to do. And around, let me see, before Thanksgiving, I posted up some pictures online onto some forums, Something Awful forum, for instance, but also Facebook. And yeah, I remember making a Facebook album that said, Manos work print? ! Yeah. So we had that going, and people started to get interested, and people started to share it, and before too long, people were asking me to do a Kickstarter. I feel like if people ask you to do a Kickstarter, you say yes. So around between Thanksgiving and Christmas of 2011, I started the Kickstarter. It lasted about a month, and by the time it was over, which was in January of 2012, I had enough funds to do it. And yeah, a few months later, I started scanning. So I think it's been exactly a year since we started the restoration, really.
Were you surprised how much money you raised with the Kickstarter? Or were you surprised how popular the Kickstarter became?
I was surprised, and in fact, it became kind of a teachable moment, really, because I had said that if I went over my Kickstarter goal of 10,000, which was enough to make a very bare bones disc, to pretty much just transfer it, dirt and all, and release it. I said if I went over that, I would increase the quality of the restoration, make a documentary, as well as all of that. But I had set down this goal of being done in, I think, August of last year on the bare bones thing, but people didn't quite understand right off the bat that it would take longer to do 4 times the work, essentially. So, yep, make sure that's communicated.
Makes sense.
Still, I think that the results are very well worth it. The restoration was done in December, and it premiered at the New Beverly in Los Angeles. And I'm screening it occasionally in the meantime while, well, let me see, I think it's the 7th of August, I'm going to be screening it in Seattle, the restoration. That should be a lot of fun. It's the same company that does the Seattle International Film Festival, but it's not part of the film festival, it's a special event. And that'll be fun. I've got cast members from the movie showing up. I've got, in Seattle, they've got a puppet version of Manos that is performed on stage.
Hands of Felt, yes.
Hands of Felt by Rachel Jackson, which is fantastic. It happens to be returning to the stage around the same time that I'm going there. So Rachel Jackson will be in attendance, showing off the puppets. Really, I've seen the master puppet myself. It's it's fantastic.
Now,
I would love to see that sometime.
Yeah, wherever.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's doing a Kickstarter now, actually, to put the show on disc so that people who aren't in Seattle can watch it. It's still going on right now, actually. I think there's about 7 days left.
I think we have a name. I think we have a name we may want to add to our list, Toby. Keep that in mind.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of Hands of Felt, you know, there's been a big resurgence in Manos in the past 2 years.
I noticed that.
In 2011, Shout Factory put out their special 2-disc Manos, The Hands of Fate, Mystery Science Theater DVD set. MST3K, Riff Tracks announced that they were going to re-riff and do a live riff of Manos. There's an announcement of a Manos sequel in the works. There's a whole lot. What do you, and you're obviously a part of that, do you attribute that to something, or do you have an explanation for that, or just...
I don't know. I mean, I think I hope I played a part in as much as people are suddenly seeing much better pictures from the movie and maybe memories come flooding back. Maybe it's a PTSD thing. I don't know. But as far as the Riff Tracks event, I was actually involved in that, though silently, because, well, they contacted me fairly early on after I'd gotten on the internet and said, hey, do you have a good print we can use? But this was very early in the process. The restoration wasn't done. Luckily, I had a theatrical print. So it was a vintage theatrical print that was from the Emerson collection that they screened in last August. So not the restoration, but an actual, like, straight from the drive-ins of Texas in the 1960s print that I ended up with.
Really, really cool.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was pretty pleased with it. It held up well on the big screen, but the restoration is, it's better. I didn't want people to confuse the two, which is why I wasn't very interested in publicity from that.
Right.
People, even then, were still like, they're riffing the restoration. No, they weren't, but it was still a much better source than had ever been seen, and I was already scanning it as part of my restoration. So it was a no-brainer to use that. And it was undeniably public domain, because there might have been rights issues with using the restoration before a distributor could really be, well, I don't know, it got complicated. But the print was not complicated.
I was going to say, do you know about the Peter Rogers copyright?
Oh, well, it's not exactly a copyright per se. They are a company that can, at the time at least, they're the reason that Mystery Science Theater got this movie, because they had a lot of public domain movie transfers that they would shop around to the broadcasters. So I have actually some beta tapes, and it's indeed the same transfer you saw on Mystery Science Theater.
That's cool.
Yep.
Have you seen the Alpha? I assume you have. The Alpha.
Oh, yeah.
The Alpha home video print.
The Alpha copy is the same copy I think you can download on the Internet Archive for free, actually.
Do you know where that print originated? That's a long shot, but I've always wondered that.
That's hard to say, because it's actually not the same transfer that Pete Rogers had. It's possible that it's just some... Well, I know that a lot of these prints were in the possession of a bonded services company in the 80s, and a transfer might have been made around that time.
Okay.
Or I know that, what's the name of the company? It doesn't exist anymore, but NTA was shopping around the movie for television broadcast in the 70s, although I don't think it ever did pan out for them. Yeah, but there's actually like a little advertising card which claims that the movie is from 1970, and it has this ad copy which kind of tries to make it seem like a Manson family thing. So clearly trendy. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see any TV station that would actually air that movie uncut. I don't think they exist.
At least not at the time.
Well, and Elvira, I know, went on to air it. I think she aired on the recent Elvira. Help me out, Toby. Elvira's Mistress of the Movie Macabre.
Movie Macabre.
Elvira Movie Macabre. She aired it not too long ago, and I'm pretty sure it was the. I wouldn't know, but I think it was the Alpha, the public domain, really bad looking one.
Yeah, there's yet another version, it seems, that I sometimes see online where I think they took that. Someone had a VHS of that, but the VHS was kind of bad, and the colors are like, clearly there's a blue section of the frame and there's a red section of the frame, and that's even worse. So there's just no good transfer of this that could go on a disc.
Right.
Even the Pete Rogers version has a lot of problems in terms of, it's just plain fuzzy. I mean, you can see that on Mystery Science Theater. This is the best version that you could find on video, straight from the broadcasters, and even that looks like last known photographs.
Yeah. Which is I was going to say, which is a comment they make in the episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is, and a lot of footage is missing from if you bought the Shout Factory 2-disc special, I'm fairly certain that's the same version. It's a very bad looking version, and I know there's a lot of scenes cut out from that version as well. It may very well be the alpha version that is on that disc.
It might very well be. It was just a little, I think it was even coming out about the time that I got the prints, so it was a little too late for me to have any involvement, but I have to say, they did okay considering what was available at the time, although there still needs to be a better Manos documentary. Hotel Torgo is all well and good, but it's a student film, I think, and it's very out of date, because it only took me a little time on Facebook to find the woman that played Debbie, for instance.
I don't know if I've talked about it on here, but I definitely had some problems with that documentary.
I think that someone really probably should do an updated documentary on Manos, especially now that all this is happening.
Yeah.
The sequel and the rep tracks and the DVD and the restoration and all that.
Well, I'm working on it. I got an interview with the master, about 2.5 hours with the master, just sat down. Wonderful guy. Tom Naiman, who is Jackie's father, of course. And Jackie as well is very talkative and loves the Q&As, and I got some good interview footage with her. Pretty soon I'm looking to interview the female lead, Diane Mari, as she's known in the movie, but not her real name, by the way, but she's if she can talk to me, she wants to talk to me, but she's got some family things right now to be taken care of, and I want to be respectful. So we'll talk soon. Yeah.
I actually was not aware that she was still alive. There was a lot of misinformation about Manos, and I remember when I first got into Mystery Science, going on the internet in 2004, and there was a lot of stuff about everyone in the cast had died except Bernie, and there was a sequel that was made by a Mexican company. Just a lot of misinformation that would not surprise me if it had been made with the intent of fooling people.
It's possible, and interestingly, as long as I've been on the internet, and one of the first places I went to on the internet was MST3K info, actually, because that site is as old as sin, but people were threatening, essentially, to make a sequel. I'm going to get my friends together with a sequel, and I think that really says something, that of all the Mystery Science Theater movies, which one do you feel you could easily make a sequel to that was as good, if not better? This is probably the number one. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because it really is that spirit of go out with some friends, make a movie. Somehow it got released.
take about 2 hours, get some friends together, make a movie. You get that.
It'd be like a combination. It is kind of like a combination between like Psycho and Blair Witch Project. Now that I think about it, because it really
Sort of.
Mm-hmm.
it really does have that feel of like they just took which to some extent is true. Like they just took a camera and just started filming some stuff.
I mean, original Texas Chainsaw is, God, it's even shot on similar film stock, but they just took a very different and classier approach, I guess you might say. Uh, Still, yeah, there are independent movies from the 60s, and we take that for granted now, but it was very hard to mount a production like that. And I go into some rhetorical detail on it, but, compare it to Night of the Living Dead. The people that made it had movie making experience. They made commercials and they made industrials, and same for Carnival of Souls, and same for Texas Chainsaw, I think, and not so much for Manos. So the difference is palpable, but the end result is a movie got released. Some are incredibly influential, and some exist on the sidelines. But this is what we call a regional film, and just when that was becoming a thing.
It's incredible to think that the movie is. We often joke that it's unwatchable, but it is truly watchable. Things are.
Mm-hmm.
It is in focus, and people aren't. Like heads
Well,
aren't cut off and stuff like that.
yes and no. Some shots are out of focus, no matter how we might try to restore them. But I will say that the restoration plays a lot faster, particularly the driving, because you can actually kind of see, you can see what's going by, you can see better. Just having things to look at increases your interest level a great deal in this film, I've found.
There's a lot of rumors going around about Manos, which I've previously discussed. This is a long shot again, but are you familiar with the rumor that there were supposed to be credits during those long driving sequences?
I believe it. I do. It is unfortunately one of those things that we can't really confirm with paperwork, but it really does seem the natural choice, because as it is now, there's no there's one title card at the very beginning, and then there's all the credits at the end, and yeah, I think they probably just ran out of money or time, maybe both. I know that the movie was edited at the local TV station in El Paso by a guy that just had edited TV, and evidence is all over the work print about that. And as much as it consists of some very disparate print sources. In some cases, it's like a pretty good Ektachrome dupe of the original material, and then in other cases, it's material straight out of the camera. So I feel like this guy was just accustomed to editing whatever he could, stuff straight out of the camera if need be. And so even in the work print itself, there are variances of quality, but it's all very watchable compared to the way we've seen it before. And the best looking material is when Torgo makes that pass at Margaret. So luckily that scene survives the best. It's emblematic of the movie. Yeah.
I mean, like, of all the scenes you'd want to survive, you'd want that scene.
That is straight out of the camera. Doesn't get any better looking than that, for sure. The wives wrestling, it's a dupe, so it's a little dirty, but it still looks, maybe appropriately so.
For all you kids out there.
Yep, and they did shoot a lot of footage of that, it feels like. I'm sure they shot the rehearsals, too.
If you listen to the Watch the Hotel documentary, I think there was a lot of substances I've heard, or stuff like that. There was a lot of enjoyment. Let's just say there was a lot of enjoyment in the making of those scenes. And we'll leave it at that.
I sure hope so. I mean, it was just, it really is just a bunch of college girls wrestling in weird costumes, and, I can understand. Right. We can all understand why that happened, but, yeah.
Reefer Madness, the hands of fate.
Exactly. I mean, it's a very pulpy movie when you get right down to it. That's where I see Hal Warren's influences really is from pulp more than any movies in particular.
Let's talk about the man, the myth himself. You talk a lot about Hal Warren on your website. And yet we don't know a whole lot about him. We think we know a lot about him. Like, what do you think was his inspiration for making this movie?
It's said that he had seen some production go through Texas, near Texas or near El Paso, well, in Texas and near El Paso. And it's true that a TV show called Route 66, which shot on location, did some shooting in Texas. And Hal, being a actor and being involved in community theater and doing that sort of thing, would have wanted to come into contact with this. He probably was at least inspired by the people he met to make a movie. It's said that he made the movie on a bet with a Hollywood screenwriter named Sterling Silliphant. And we obviously can't back that up because both the men involved have passed on, but it wouldn't surprise me. At least that's what he told people, is that he made it on a bet. Even if that's not the case, I mean, it's clear that he'd seen production, he wanted in on that. He felt he could make it happen. He put together the money, he got investors. He was a good salesman, really. At the time, he sold insurance. He did sell fertilizer, but that was later.
Yeah.
And I'm sure to him, it was just all selling. He didn't really much look down on selling fertilizer or anything, or movies. So I guess we can all learn something from that.
Which, in a way, makes him no different than a K. Gordon Murray or a Sandy Frank, you know. They just wanted to sell movies, and they didn't look down on it.
Sure. Yeah, in a different place, in a different time, he might have had greater success. Although, I would say getting shown in theaters today would be considered a success.
Which, there's been debates about how we've had the debates. I don't know how far and widespread these debates have gone, but how does Hal Warren react to this success, the sudden success of this film?
Oh, he passed away in 1985. Mm-hmm. And how would he have reacted? Yeah. I'm sure he would have been excited to receive some acknowledgement and, some appreciation for what he pulled off, because he was not receiving appreciation when the movie came out, that's for sure. It was sort of like from... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've always kind of sort of thought of Warren as, you know, the Johnny Depp film Ed Wood.
Yeah.
I kind of imagine Warren was more like Ed Wood than Ed Wood was like Ed Wood.
In as much as the movie is sort of a fictional portrait, and he might be closer to reality. Yeah, maybe.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
He knew how to get the right people involved to make a movie happen, and I'd say that's a start for sure. When it comes right down to it, I think he might be looking for ways to, make some money in his old age if he were still around. But
I'm told he wore the master costume every year for Halloween.
That's true, and it still is with his family, but unfortunately his family has elected not to be involved with what I'm doing, unfortunately.
It's their wishes, it's fine. I was going to ask you about that, but you've already answered my... I was going to ask you, but you've already answered my question, so... well, what else do we have here? It is a major undertaking to do this. Or do you feel it's a major undertaking to do this? It just sounds like a dumb question, but is it hard to restore it?
Well, yes and no. It's hard in the sense that I'm still working my day job while doing this, but on the other hand, this has been a wonderful way to. I call it a personal project. I hope to put a personal stamp on it, not by changing the film in any way, but being as non-judgmental about it as possible, and just getting the facts together and getting the movie to look as good as it can. And hard, you know what, considering the people I've met through this and the audiences which have been so enthusiastic and the people who are so thrilled about it online, it's not hard at all in that sense. I definitely see a purpose here, and I hope I get to treat other movies with the same respect.
Great. And you also have Atomic Brain, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, although those are just prints, although they look pretty good.
Okay.
What I have the best material for, ironically enough, is the German Hamlet.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, that appeared on the movie in the sci-fi. The show was in the sci-fi era. They did this version of Hamlet, which was made for German television with Maximilian Schell, and the dub features Ricardo Montalban and
John Banner.
Yeah, and it's a very strange, and it's also heavily edited. The actual movie is about 4 hours, or maybe 3.5 to 4 hours. I have negatives for that.
Okay.
I have both audio tracks, English and German. I think it would make a fantastic release, but there's just not as much interest as there is in Manos.
Right. I was going to ask, because that movie is, heavily edited from what I've read that it was originally about. So you have a 4 hour, you have the entire 3 hour long version? Wow, that's impressive.
Fine-grained positives, original negatives. Yeah, I could really do something with it if interest was enough. But I think that I should probably stick to just one movie at a time.
Agreed.
And Manos was in the most urgent need of help.
Coming soon to a theater near you, Hamlet. It is literally just like watching a play that they filmed.
It really kind of is. It's something you'd kind of see on like PBS. Ish.
Yeah, and it wouldn't really need that much cleanup. So in theory, it could be done, quote unquote, cheaply, as cheap as it could be to scan about 4 hours of film. That is.
I mean, you just put Ricardo Montalban on a copy of Hamlet, and you could probably make some money off the DVD of that.
Yeah. Like these.
True. So that will be addressed as soon as I'm done with Manos, and I'm working doggedly to make it happen as soon as possible. The only real delay at this point is on the side of distribution, which, if I'd have self-distributed, it would have been out by now. But I wanted to put it on store shelves, and some distributors contacted me with interest, and they're looking to, I am just trying to get them to announce a release date, because a lot of people are waiting for this. Heck, I'm waiting for it. But there's no reason that I couldn't have a release out in the summer, but they were kind of pushing for October. I think that's too far away. Maybe we'll split the difference and land in autumn, which would be fine. My birthday's in September. Maybe it'll be out in time for my birthday. That's what I'm hoping.
I'm not sure if we can air that or not.
Oh, yeah, you know what? That's probably getting into...
Yeah, well, we're going to cut that out.
There's too much speculation involved, but there's your answer. It's a confusing answer.
Okay. Let me... So, just because we're going to cut that out, let me just address the issue.
Yes.
It's still in the work. Let me... So, from what you've told me, I assume that the DVD Blu-ray is still in the works, as it were.
The restoration itself is finished. The distributor has given me a little extra time to assemble... Oh, no, I can't say that either. Okay, sorry. Tell you what, okay.
It's fine.
The restoration itself is finished. I'm using the extra time to really put together some fancy extra features, a documentary, and get an audio commentary in there, because I was surprised with how much Tom Naiman remembered. And Jackie, sure, she was 6 or 7 when the film was made, but she remembers it like you'd remember a particularly great summer vacation. She had a great time working with her dad and her family dog, who played the hellhound, and all that stuff. And she's been very much a scholar about Manos, probably the best one we've got, and as much as she knows all these people, they keep in touch. So there should be a lot of good information printed. Did you know, for instance, that pictures from the set of Manos ended up in an issue of Popular Photography magazine?
I did not.
Tell us more. Is there more to the story?
Well, a little bit, and it has to do with a guy that I'm about to interview pretty soon. But he was German. He was on the army base, and he, for one reason or another, got into photography. And one of his first jobs was more or less taking pictures on the set of Manos. Unfortunately, very few of them survived because this was 1966. But he did some alternative processing on some of them, like copied over onto slides and used heat to modify the pictures and sent them into Popular Photo. And he had a 2-page article printed about him. And there, in the April 1967 issue, is Torgo and the Master. They look a little different, but there they are.
That
you know what?
Really cool.
Maybe I shouldn't have said which issue that is, because I still have to obtain a copy on eBay. I want people running out and grabbing it. Okay, so
if you want to say that, I can edit that.
All right. Well, how do we do that? Anyway, I've seen it on microfilm, is how I've seen it so far. So I'm about to obtain the actual issue, and I'm also about to interview the guy. Even though most of his photographs don't survive, he was about college age at the time. He'd remember very well the set. And I'm trying to get, regardless of roles, the people who were on set.
Well,
Cool.
I think that this has been a very informative discussion. I think that now might be a good time to wrap it up. Would you say, gentlemen?
All right.
Okay.
I
Sure.
think so.
Sounds good.
As with every guest of the MSTieCast, we always ask, what are your top 5 favorite episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Well, I'm going to be a little predisposed to the Mike era. There's nothing against Joel, though, because obviously love Creeping Terror, Day the Earth Froze, Beast of Jecka Flats. Wait, did Day the Earth Froze a Mike or a Joel?
That would be Joel.
Yeah, I'm a bad fan. I suddenly forgot, but I was right. Okay. As far as Mike, I think that, Brute Man is great, but Sci-Fi Channel era, I gotta go with Werewolf for one, and Writing with Death is the one that my sister and I probably wore the tape out on the most. Just, it's a great episode for Tom Servo because he's doing his Ben Murphy impression, and somehow I just think when you give them the 70s to work with, the results are always great. As you can see on the Viva Knievel riff tracks, which is also great.
Very
So
cool.
that was fun. Yeah. I think there was 5 episodes in there.
Beast, Day, Werewolf, Riding into Death, something else. I couldn't remember the first one you said.
I think I did Creeping Terror.
Creeping
right?
Terror. That's 5. That's good enough.
You know what? The shorts are also so memorable. I gotta hand it to Chicken of Tomorrow, which is my favorite short.
It's a disturbing short when you realize how chicken. If you've ever seen chicken farming, if you've ever seen the actual Chicken of Tomorrow, as in the chicken of today, you realize how disturbing chicken farming became and how idealized that short is.
There's an Italian horror movie that takes place on a chicken farm called Death Laid an Egg, and I always thought it would have been a great candidate for the show. But, watch it if you haven't. I don't want to spoil it.
You heard it here first. Find Death Laid an Egg, an Italian film, and maybe it'll get a riff tracks. Who knows?
That could be good. Ah, God, they breed this chicken with no legs or head just to make I don't know, an ideal chicken, and it's disturbing. But anyway, it's weird.
Ew.
And of course, Poultrygeist.
Oh, another good choice.
What are some of your favorite riffs?
Let me see. Favorite riffs. It's funny. Every time I have to rewatch the movie, it's very possible that those riffs will just pop up in my head because we're all so familiar with the episode. But yeah, the one that really sums it up is Joel just losing his cool and screaming, "Do something," which doesn't happen very much in the show. And, the riff tracks also had a lot of good... it was really great to watch it with fresh eyes like that. So there was a part where they have the dog say, "I miss Michael Vick," which was, topical. And then another Toddlers and Tiaras joke at the end, which was, I don't know. Did you watch it?
Toby? I didn't. I never got around to it.
I had not.
Okay, well, hopefully they release it on video. It's well within their rights to do so. I don't know.
I'm very anti re-riffing something. I know
Well,
I'm not in that cult, but
it was so long ago, but
I understand. But
it was
I really
more
like
riff-traff.
Cinematic Titanic's re-riff of Santa Claus, so I really don't have any problem with it. I just think
I
they're
want to retroactively add Santa Claus to one of my favorite episodes, but then again, which is better, Santa Claus or Santa Claus Conquers the Martians? It's hard.
depends on my mood at Christmas. I
Yeah,
watch
if you like creepy laughing reindeer robots, then Santa Claus has the edge.
But if you like lazy green Martians, then Santa Claus Conquers the Martians has the edge. So, different
Man,
strokes.
it's hard. Exactly. If only they both had an oscillating fan with an ear on it, that would be.
Yeah. So we
I
combine.
don't even know if I answered your question.
I feel satisfied with the question I asked and the answer I received. I don't know about you, Toby.
Yeah,
Very good.
I'm satisfied with these answers.
Yep.
And I've been satisfied with the show so far.
Yep.
So,
thank you for coming on our show and talking about your project.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great just shooting the breeze, talking about Mystery Science Theater, which, ironically, I don't get to do very much these days.
well, this has been the MSTieCast. Thank you very much for listening. For Justin Toner, who is not here, I'm Toby Mobius.
I'm Ben Murphy.
I'm Ben Solovey.
And this has been the show. There is no way out of here.
Now, poopy.